I don't think it's a secret that gaming has been embroiled in a culture war with sides set ever since Gamergate really, and it's not just gaming but seemingly all entertainment. But why? The game is woke, gamers are misogynists. Why does it matter if gender is body type A and B? Why does it matter that it isn't? The chuds are just anti-woke grifters. We want gaming to be more inclusive, and on and on and on it goes. It's just a video game, bro. Why does it matter? Oh, so you don't mind if I play a game where I collect children, right? Clearly it's not just a game to you, or anyone for that matter. Everyone has at least a passing interest in what others do alone in their homes.
May the Prophet's word be a safe haven for you.
Play is something all mammals do, and you can say that it serves a purpose in growing, learning how to hunt, learning how to fight, etc. But if you will allow me to add my own spin, I think our entertainment forms a social commonality that brings us closer together. The Romans understood this. The Colosseum was not only the central point for entertainment within the Roman Empire, but it was also a political platform. If you can mix entertainment, play, and politics, you have the hearts and minds of the people. You also just have to keep on winning. Simple. This idea of entertainment and propaganda has continued with us through most of history. For example, in 1970, Operation Mockingbird was uncovered as a CIA initiative to spread anti-Russian and anti-communist rhetoric. They had approximately 3,000 agents in several prominent news outlets, and they funded the animated Hollywood production of Animal Farm. The US government at the time felt that doing this was worth approximately $265 million a year. That's how important it was to them, and this was, of course, largely thanks to the Cold War. And I know exactly what you're thinking. All of this can be traced back to Plato, that asshole. Okay, it's not his fault, but hear me out. Plato brought with him dialectics. This is essentially the basis of honest debate. You have a thesis and an antithesis, and you pit these contradicting positions against each other until you synthesize a new understanding. Using this method, Plato came to the understanding that our reality is essentially a fake, an imperfect reflection of the real world. And transcending in understanding brings us closer to this real world. Coincidentally, Plato's findings dovetail nicely with the esoteric religion called Hermeticism. Hermes was the messenger of the gods, bringing the word to the world of mortals. And therefore, Hermeticism is all about incorporating the word of the divine to transform oneself. There are a bunch of other pieces to Hermeticism, but the main idea is that there is this ultimate reality as the all, which is both the creator and the nature of the cosmos, pre-existing in all things. Or in other words, the universe is God, and it is the mind of God, and therefore as we transcend in consciousness through a kind of mental alchemy, God is realizing himself, and eventually God is realized, and I guess that's when the Necrons have won. So anyways, I know this sounds random, but bear with me. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, born in 1770, was a German philosopher who decided it would be really great if we could fuse Hermeticism with Plato's dialectic, and thus the Hermetic dialectic was born. Look, Hegel was brilliant, complicated, and he may have been crazy too. But here's the important bit. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Your thesis is opposed with your antithesis, and then Hegel's form of synthesis was the positive passing through the negative and becoming a new concept. The word he often used was aufheben, which means to preserve and abolish at the same time. It's this alchemical idea of transmutation, but used in the realm of thought. Now on top of this, Hegel imported the entire notion of God and the all realizing itself through the process of the dialectic. In this sense, one can draw the conclusion that we could essentially transmute our consciousness into a state where God is realized and the world becomes perfect. We then have the French Revolution in 1789, and this is where our political left and right comes from.
Bonjour, mes amis.
People that wanted the revolution sat on the left of the king, people that wanted the status quo sat on the right of the king. Why we still use this dumb spectrum is beyond me, as it seems to only separate people even when there isn't a problem. But there you go. Karl Marx is born 1818 and would go on to co-author the Communist Manifesto. Now the important part for us is that Marx was a huge Hegel simp and kept pictures of his feet. And what I mean by that is that he reckoned Hegel almost had it right, but instead of using the Hermetic dialectic for thought, we should use it for stuff. And so Marx birthed the material dialectic. This is the crucial point where everything just falls apart. Marx borrows the Hermetic dialectic from Hegel and inadvertently imports the presupposition that there is a material evolutionary endpoint from the Hermetic belief in the all or God, if you will. Now in Marx's dialectic you have the poor workers, the oppressed, and the rich masters, the oppressors, as the thesis and antithesis under capitalism, and the Aufheben is to preserve the means of production and abolish property rights. Vladimir Lenin, born 1870, would say, "Hold my beer," and then we have the Russian Revolution. Now Lenin was smart in that he understood how to read between the lines. Abolishing property rights means killing property owners, because if you let people talk, you might reach a compromise and then you can never reach the Aufheben. So his plan was kill the masters, seize the means of production, and then impose an authoritarian state to force the people, for the people, to be selfless and act as a collective of people for the common good of the people. The idea was that if the state forced you to live as a communist, a new Soviet man would be born, achieving an evolution of consciousness, and then the state will just wither away, just like Marx predicted, and then we get mammoth tanks. I think at this point enough time has passed now where we can look at Russia and say, yeah, nah, that was dumb, and we don't have mammoth tanks. So anyways, Marx predicted that capitalist societies would fall to revolution and become communist. One problem: Russia was feudal. The capitalist societies tended towards fascism, if anything. See Germany, 1933. Horrified by this trending development and disillusionment, Marxists huddled in the Institute of Social Research founded in Frankfurt, 1923. Unfortunately, most of the members were Jewish. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Nazis hated Marxists and Jews. And the Frankfurt School had stacking debuffs, so the members fled, where many of them found work in US government agencies and tertiary academic institutions. The Frankfurt School includes Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, and Herbert Marcuse, among others. The members of the Frankfurt School are not a monolith, nor a cabal, but they are connected in their furthering of Marx and Hegelian Hermetic dialectics within Western academics, which would later fuse with postmodernism as well. While it would be unfair to say that the members of the Frankfurt School worked together to destroy the Western world, they carried the faith-based Hermetic seed with them and preserved it within critical theory, created by Max Horkheimer. It is also true that the most influential member, Herbert Marcuse, was a huge fan of another Marxist, Antonio Gramsci, who believed that capitalism held a cultural hegemony over the working class which suppressed revolutions. So anyways, the crux is that the Frankfurt School believed capitalism oppresses the working class and holds it in place with the Colosseum, the entertainment, the carrot on the stick, the American dream, the big titty anime goth girls, the can of Coke, the Mountain Dew and the monster truck.
An adventure made for capitalism by capitalism. Celebrate the beauty of capitalism by pre-ordering today.
Play it day one with game.
And so they believed that the solution was to pass Western culture through critical theory to aufheben the culture and strip away the oppression, so to speak. This is essentially the basis for critical theory. Now, unfortunately, you are still stuck with the presupposition of communist revelation. That's an important detail. You have to actually believe that the communist collective, the new Soviet man, is at the end of the road for any of this to have meaning.
The family.
Family takes care of its own.
In exactly the same way, Plato requires a real and a fake world, and seeing that there is no empirical evidence of a working communist collective at a national level, it is really a matter of faith. Now, I do think that the Frankfurt School members perhaps started the fire and they have long lost control. Many of them have gone on record to say that they were not fans of how their teaching has been adopted. So in many ways, the expression of the woke mind virus is kind of apt. It's this Hermetic belief of the all realizing itself, carried through Marxism, carried through the Frankfurt School, and on it goes. Or as a Marxist would say,
Maria, 処分確認
And so the dialectic progresses. So anyways, where critical theory goes off its rails is that it starts with the presupposition that pretty much all cultural, political, and social norms are tools of oppression because it's part of the capitalist cultural hegemony, and therefore normal is bad, and that's how we end up at maths is racist.
Oh shit! Plot twist city!
For example, if you ask a school teacher why we eat cornflakes for breakfast, they are going to tell you about the simplicity of preparation, that they are simple carbs, that they are easy to digest, and there's a lot of corn in the US. So it's a simple process and easy to distribute. The real reason was that Dr. John Harvey Kellogg believed that bland cereals would curb masturbation. The critical theorist would argue that we need to question the norms with the lens that you are oppressed, and that Kellogg was trying to oppress your libido and control you, which is true. He was. But it doesn't change that what the school teacher said is also true and more relevant to your situation. What the teacher said is the current reason why people have it for breakfast, and Kellogg was just flat out wrong in his assumption. So you can see that critical theory has a streamlining effect that draws focus on injustice rather than whether or not it is currently in your interest. It is designed to make you class conscious and think on oppression. It is not an honest form of inquiry. Note that I am not saying that it is bad to question authority. That clearly exists without critical theory. It's the presupposition that begs the assumption that whatever is normal is also a tool of oppression, which is insidious because it encourages post hoc fallacies as academics. Furthermore, it carries the silent assumption that anything outside of the norm is good because it is progressing the dialectic, and progressing the dialectic is the only apparent good. Anyways, stick with me. Plato to Hegel to Marx to Frankfurt School, and this finds us smack bang in the middle of the second wave feminist movement, which, intended or not, was heavily influenced by Herbert Marcuse. I think if I just read you the first paragraph of the Wikipedia page for the dialectic of sex, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. To quote, "The dialectic of sex, the case for feminist revolution, is a 1970 book by the radical feminist activist Shulamith Firestone. Written over a few months when Firestone was 25, it has been described as a classic of feminist thought. Firestone argues that the sexual class system predates and runs deeper than any other form of oppression, and the eradication of sexism will require a radical reordering of society. No matter how many levels of consciousness, see what I mean, one reaches, the problem always goes deeper. It is everywhere. Feminists have to question not just all of Western culture, but the organization of culture itself, and further, even the very organization of nature. The goal of the feminist revolution," she wrote, "must be not just the elimination of male privilege, but of the sex distinction itself, so that genital differences no longer have cultural significance." End quote.
She's not exactly your average trans athlete.
Well, what is an average trans athlete? Honestly, I find that kind of bigoted, David.
Doesn't that kind of explain why we need an executive order just to stop men beating the shit out of women on a sports field? So yeah, look, I don't think it's a mystery to see where I'm going with this. They are taking the Hermetic dialectic, applying Aufheben to sex in the Hermetic belief that there is a sex singularity. Another observation that is plain as day is Gamergate 2014 was largely centered around the rejection of radical feminism and the favoritism it garnered in games journalism.
Help me! I'm so afraid!
I know that the Wikipedia page says hate campaign against women, but I've already debunked the Wikipedia page in my Gamergate series. The most important factor was that they were all radical feminists. Anita Sarkeesian particularly uses books from the second wave for her beliefs, and journalists were siding with them beyond the scope of ethical reporting. So look, the reason why feminism and anyone else who builds their worldview on critical theory wants to have a say in video games is because it is an integral part of the Colosseum. They see it as this integral pillar within capitalist Western hegemony, and therefore it is also a tool of oppression that needs to be aufhebened. Now, something that I find interesting is that critical theory is essentially a pessimist's tool. Even when it does correctly identify oppression, it still doesn't have a plan other than to point at it and say, see, look at the bad thing. There it is. It's so bad. I hate it. Censor it. It never really results in, Okay, I don't like that, so I'll make a competing option that's better. In fact, it only ever rarely seems to, well...
Are you trying to have sex with me? Quick, think about us having sex. Fucking ropes. I'm a dragon slayer. Is it because I didn't fit as a woman? Person. And using they for myself. So... we're together now. Yeah.
Seize the means of production and die. And so in terms of video games, this comes through as something like there are too many male protagonists in video games and a game with a male protagonist comes out. So IGN makes an article about how male protagonists are oppressing female protagonists, and then the next game in the franchise comes out and the protagonist is swapped out with a female protagonist, even though everyone already liked the male protagonist. And of course, this new protagonist's main plot is almost certainly that she was always powerful, but she was yet to realize it.
I've been fighting with one arm tied behind my back.
It's an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self.
And transcend into godlike understanding of her powers. Holy shit, it's Aufheben again.
Weird.
Of course the game flops, because you essentially just took something they liked and made it worse. Welcome to the Soviet Union, bitch. Critical theorists cannot understand why this is happening. Surely everyone should be thanking them for exposing their oppression, right? Now here is where I feel I need to make a distinction. A lot of people are going to be like, Hermetic, nah, I don't believe in that shit. Of course you don't. You don't need to believe or understand it, you just need to follow a culture that does. There are multiple reasons to swim in a tribal stream, and I think many of us don't think far beyond our perceived interests, if I'm being honest, so it's quite natural to align with the team that is going to help you get what you want. So then why do people align with a faith they don't really believe in? Well, there's going to be multiple reasons, but I think the broadest explanation comes from Friedrich Nietzsche, another German philosopher born 1844. Now, Nietzsche posited this idea of master morality and slave morality. Think of how any Greek hero introduces themselves and you have master morality. They start with lineage, highlight their qualities, and then tell us all of their deeds. I, live average gamer, son of extra gamer, born on a mountaintop where I perfected the craft of talking about boobs using German philosophers. Millions have heard my words and said, Baka, hentai! It is true and real. That is master morality. And generally people that are successful in the world gravitate towards these measurable goods because, well, it suits them. Like everyone knows that beauty is good, but it's easier for a beautiful person to become caught up in the value of it. Don't get misled. Master morality is not simply the exaltation of natural goods in human society. It's also tied to a kind of cruel, aloof, and naive self-belief in one's own importance. Now, on the other end, you have slave morality, and slave morality was modeled after Christianity in Nietzsche's time. Essentially, slave morality doesn't have measurable goods. It just takes the goods from master morality, labels them as evil, and then works out the goods in opposition. You say you're beautiful? Well, that's prideful and vain, says the fat person. Defeat your enemies? No. Take up your cross, says the weak. Slave morality appeals to people that aren't capable of extraordinary feats because it gives them a way to subvert the game of naturalism and change the rules. Okay, Stellar Blade is an incredible financial success, but it's turning everyone porn-brained and therefore it's evil. You get the picture. Now, slave morality sounds bad, but it's important to remember that a lot of good comes through charity, a lot of that is also Christian, and this would not be the case if slave morality didn't exist. So don't get the wrong idea. Neither morality is good or bad, they are just magnets that pull in opposite directions. Now, Western society is largely built on Christian values. Like, it literally says, "In God we trust" on American bills, and you get more votes if you say you are a Christian, even when everyone knows it's bullshit. You can say that people are no longer Christian, but again, you don't need to believe or understand it to align with it. Being a Christian versus living in a society that was built from a Christian worldview are two different things. Why this matters is because in many ways we have institutionalized slave morality to the point where we do quite a lot to make sure that society is as victimless as possible possible, and where there are victims, it is good to align with these victims, lift them up, and abolish their oppressors. Okay, so now we need to talk about Niccolo Machiavelli, a diplomat from Florence born in 1469. Machiavelli wrote The Prince, which was this extremely honest, pragmatic, and amoral perspective on governing. So yeah, the church banned it for 200 years because it was too real. And I actually advise that everyone should read The Prince precisely because it is uncomfortable, but it is also just very accurate for how most government leadership works. Machiavelli posits that a leader should be discerning on whether to act the fox or the lion, and you can pretty much say that the fox is working under slave morality and the lion is working under master morality. So this is the dance. You are the fox when you do not have leverage, and you are the lion when you do. Marxists do not have leverage because they do not have a working model. Critical theory is the mask of the fox to align itself with slave morality. People at the bottom of society are more likely to align with slave morality because it benefits them. However, people at the top of society can also align with slave morality because it also benefits them. I.e., if you are already rich, you can say, tax the rich, pass your tax to the poor by upping the price of your goods, and then you and the poor sit together complaining about how the government is robbing you both, strengthening that sense of, let's say, camaraderie. It is a clever way of fooling critical theorists into thinking they have succeeded in synthesizing the classes, and it works because they are naive.
It costs $0 to be a decent human being.
Duh, they're utopian. Very simply put, the virtue signaling that we see in the games industry is the outworking of critical theory using the mask of the fox in an attempt to align with our personal struggles. They just forgot the part where you're supposed to come across as sincere, and that's what happens when you give university student ideologies a megaphone. In addition, the industry gets tax incentives and government funding for aligning with slave morality, and left unchecked, it has adopted critical theory as its compass. Pushed to its logical conclusion, it is institutionalized racism and misandry, bearing in mind that feminism is the de facto ideology regarding sex within a critical theory lens. And this is why the target is always going to be straight white males. Many will align with this, thinking that they need to atone for the allegations made against them, regardless of the evidence, but guess what? As soon as the fox has leverage, it becomes the lion. There is no amount of apology, reparations, or platitudes that will absolve you in critical theory. The best you can ever amount to is self-induced slavery so that your new masters can call you an ally. Okay, so let's put this together. The Hermetic dialectic and the evolutionary realization of human consciousness as a collective is the faith by which Marxism operates. Marxism recognizes entertainment as the Colosseum that holds capitalism in place and creates critical theory as a means of liberating the masses. This somewhat works because Western society is built with a foundation in slave morality, and critical theory leverages slave morality to maximize the effect of class distinction. People that have knowingly or unknowingly aligned with critical theory for their own benefit wear the mask of the fox until they have leverage, at which point they become the lion. Who are the people most affected? University students and practitioners of soft sciences, aka pseudosciences that don't require you to engage with the scientific method. These include sociology, gender studies, anthropology, psychology, and political science. It's not to say that these subjects are worthless and don't contribute. It's just that humans are complicated and they are terrible at controlling for variables, which leads them to also being terrible at predicting outcomes, which is a fundamental requirement within the scientific method. Of course, these are going to extend to journalism and creative writing, because writing things for people requires some study of people, and hence we have a critical theory lean that shows through in both games journalism and game storytelling. So to give you an example of how this plays out, if a video game comes out and it puts a minority on a pedestal under the lens of critical theory, then it is lauded as a great success.
She looks like me. She looks like me.
For example, Dragon Age the Veilguard came out with many 10 out of 10 reviews from established media, people with journalism degrees. I'll just quote the IGN review here to quote, and while we've been asked by the devs not to spoil specifically who I'm talking about here, it's Tash. As a non-binary person myself, Veilguard includes some of the most authentic representation of coming to terms with gender stuff and having to navigate your family's reaction to it I've seen yet in a game. It doesn't feel like an after-school special or like I'm being pandered to. It's quite well-handed, and finding out that the writer for this character is non-binary themselves did not surprise me at all, end quote. Everyone knew that the Veilguard was going to be a financial disaster from the first trailer. Needless to say, they forged on, and it failed so spectacularly that EA fired the writing team and washed their hands of it. Master Morality says financial success is the good outcome. Slave Morality says the social message is the good outcome. Comparatively, we can look at Stellar Blade, which has a PC release that is topping multiple charts. It features conventionally attractive characters, and the first thing that game journalists did was say that it was evil because it catered to the male gaze and therefore excludes women, because of course you need those class distinctions, don't you? Anyways, Shift Up is rolling in money and gamers love it. Master Morality says beauty is good and this will help lead to financial success. Slave Morality says abolishing conventions is good and the success of Stellar Blade is an acknowledgement of social rot. Now, of course, within a dialectic, you need an opposition to your thesis, and this is where the left-right political spectrum comes into play. Critical theory takes a position on the left, and therefore anything it opposes must of course be on the right, according to them anyways, or as many journalists would like to assert, the alt-right. I'll posit an alternative here. I think most gamers engage with video games as anarchists, and when I say anarchist, I mean as defined as political anarchism. This means that when gamers interface with video games and talk about them, they prefer freedom of association and incentive-based government where force is abolished as much as possible. This comes through in games design as well. Every video game basically tries to give the player the ability to approach it in any way they choose, but you get more rewards if you engage with it optimally. And when you think about it, you can really see that video game culture is essentially, okay, how do we make a lucid dream that also makes sense when it's observed by other people? What are things that gamers complain about? Invisible walls, lack of choice, forced dialogue, forced behavior, political messaging. Like, ever notice that people say, you just don't like the game because it's not enforcing your politics? Nuh-uh, that's a shit take. Here's how gamers want politics in their games. And you are going to see this in every decent game that deals with political themes. You give the honest perspective of the thesis, you give the honest perspective of the antithesis, and then you say, okay, what do you think? That's the kind of gaming politics that gamers respect, and you can see it in BioShock, Dragon Age Origins, Mass Effect, Stellar Blade, heck, Nikke Goddess of Victory, the Metal Gear series, even original Star Wars allowed the Sith to speak some sense.
I'm a member of the Imperial Senate on a diplomatic mission to Alderaan.
You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take it away!
So yeah, I think that's what gamers want. Critical theory is inflexible on this. It's the same reason Lenin decided he needed to kill the landowners. It's the same reason why Herbert Marcuse was pro-censorship. It's the same reason Larry Fink thinks that he needs to force behaviors.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors. We added 4 more points diverse employment this year. If you don't achieve these levels of impact, you have to force gender or race, any way you want to say the composition of your team. We're going to have to force change.
It's the same reason that games journalists can't just say, yeah, I think the Veilguard was shit. The Hermetic dialect as a tool cannot survive mild questioning or empirical data. These two groups cannot see eye to eye, and they have completely different underlying motives for engaging in video games, and that's why the culture war exists as it does currently. But that's just my opinion. So what's yours?